When I last visited Singapore, part of the refresh as part of our strategic partnership was to look at the working holiday scheme that we share. We've had the chance to do that over the last 2 years, and just in time for the reopening of New Zealand's borders, we're very pleased to announce that refreshed working holiday program. The changes that we'll be making will mean that now Singaporeans and New Zealanders aged between 18 and 30 will be able to participate in working holiday schemes in either country. It's being extended from 6 months to 12 months, which brings it into line with other working holiday schemes. The requirement on education has changed, so now simply requires 2 years or equivalent of tertiary level education. And the number that will be able to participate in the program over a 12-month period will be extended from 200 to 300 individuals on either side. The other change that we're announcing today is the bringing forward of that scheme for Singaporeans wanting to travel to New Zealand. They'll be eligible to apply from the 5th of May. And I'm advised that roughly 90% of working holiday applications are being processed in less than 2 weeks. So that means anyone who chooses to come will very quickly be able to receive their visa and travel to New Zealand. Later on, I'll be meeting briefly with individuals who have been part of the working holiday scheme or who are keen to be to continue to promote that program. Happy to take your questions.
Prime Minister, 3 members of the delegation have tested positive for historical infections, meaning they won't be able to go on to Tokyo. Are you getting worried that you might get left behind?
I'm very pleased to confirm that I have returned a negative PCR test and will be travelling on to Tokyo. One of the precautionary measures that we took before travel was that late last week I took a PCR just to confirm that I didn't have a historical case that might rear its head at an inopportune time, to, as much as we can, ensure the ability to travel onwards. Look, I think what we can see from the experience that we're all having as part of this delegation is that many borders, many countries around the world do still have restrictions or requirements in place as part of their border reopenings. We're experiencing that, and it's again just a demonstration of the impact of the pandemic.
And with your ahead of your bilaterals this afternoon, what will be the absolute top of the agenda for you?
Look, 2 things. Just the importance of the relationship with Singapore is our 5th biggest export partner. And so this is a very important region for us economically. 20% of our exports come through this hub within Southeast Asia. So that'll be a big part of our discussions, but also just the environment that we find ourselves in, the war in Ukraine, the continuing geostrategic pressures in our region. Singapore's an important partner for us. We're like-minded on many issues, so I imagine those will be top of mind.
How will you be working with Singapore to try and entice the US back to the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal?
You can already see signs that the United States are looking to further their economic relationships in the region. But I think between New Zealand, Singapore and Japan, we all see the benefits that the CPTPP has offered us as nations. It sets a very high standard for trade, and that's the kind of standard that we'll of course continue to be promoting, that those who wish to join should be looking to that agreement. To New Zealand. But we'll also look for other ways to encourage particularly the likes of the United States to be a part of the economic architecture of this region, to engage in trade relationships, preferably in multilateral agreements, but again, their presence here is valued in whatever form that takes.
What's your relationship like with Prime Minister Lee? Obviously it's been a 3-year hiatus since you last sat down with him.
Certainly the relationship has not been in hiatus. In fact, Prime Minister Lee is someone that I've engaged with multiple times during the pandemic for 2 reasons. Firstly, early on in 2020, when we were experiencing those early challenges of supply chain issues, it was clear that by working together we could resolve some of each other's problems. For New Zealand, making sure we still had critical medical equipment and products coming through, and for Singapore, who are reliant on 90% of their food products coming in from external sources, ensuring that that supply was still occurring. We worked together on some of those issues. We also worked together to remove friction in some of those critical goods and services, which actually ended up being adopted by other countries as a result. So we've been in contact a lot. We've shared ideas, concerns, troubles with COVID. And I have to say, I think our relationship has been strengthened.
You've only got half an hour for the conversation with PM Lee. Is that long enough to really have flesh out these issues that you're talking about?
Actually, a little bit longer than that. And then we've got the working lunch, in which case last time we were able to meet, we continued our business over lunch as well. But again, Prime Minister Lee is someone that at any point we can reach out and pick up the phone. And actually, the last time I spoke with him, the only reason that we spoke, I believe it was October of last year, was just to talk about the current state of Delta. It's a kind of relationship where we check in frequently and share ideas.
You say that we are...
On the working holidays visa, why 1 year and not 2 years, like some of the European visas that New Zealand has, to get people hiring someone that they want to know that they're there for a good period of time?
They do vary, those agreements, and they're reciprocal. So it does depend on both sides and what both sides are looking for in their working holiday schemes, and also the history of those schemes as well. But the idea for them is for an individual to come over, experience a place. Look, they may choose to study, and there's limits put on how long someone can study for, because the idea is that they travel, they enjoy, they experience the dual benefit of tourism whilst also enabling them to have an income. What we also from time to time try and encourage is that there will be those who come over, might find themselves in an area where we have a skills gap, and we then might encourage them to stay. But the initial first outreach for the working holiday scheme is often for that purposes of travel and experience.
A man died in Auckland Port this morning on a Singaporean ship. Has anyone raised that with you? Have you had any advice on that from officials here or at home?
No, I don't have any details on that. And look, first and foremost, in lieu of having any details, my acknowledgement would simply go to the family and their colleagues.
Is there only an extra 100 more in the working holiday visa scheme with Singapore? Is that correct?
So it takes it to 300.
That's pretty small fry, though. Did Singapore want to keep it at that level, or did we want more, to open our doors more for that?
Yeah, and look, they vary across countries, and often, again, it comes down to how long they've been in existence for. Often, again, what both sides have historically been comfortable with. It was a no-brainer for us to increase. I can't speak to the position of officials in Singapore. It is fair to say it's only been in recent years, pre the closure, that actually the 200 were met. But in those recent years, we did see good demand, and so it made sense for us to increase and meet that demand.
And do you think being...
mentioned that.
Just back on the CPTPP.
Yeah.
You obviously have plans to travel to the US this year. I mean, how aware is President Biden that is quite top of agenda? And do you know whether Singapore and Japan have sort of leadership plans to be heading over there and be talking about that issue as well? Is it that much of a priority?
I can't speak to the travel intentions of any other countries. I know, of course, that Prime Minister Lee has recently engaged with President Biden, and it will be interesting to speak with him around his thoughts on future accession to CPTPP. Keep in mind, of course, that with CPTPP, those who are applicants to wish to join, they are worked through in succession. There are a number who are interested, but that won't stop us from continuing to encourage others.
You say that we're New Zealanders like mine.
President Biden, though, to actually get it across the line.
Look, there'll be a number of factors and considerations for the US administration over their trade engagement, CPTPP and beyond. But I think what they'll hear consistently from this region is whether it's CPTPP or other instruments, we're interested in seeing greater engagement from the United States in this region in an economic sense. A trade forms a strong basis for that engagement and for that growth in relationships. We don't want the region to solely be having conversations around strategic defence issues, militarisation issues. We want to be talking about foreign policy as a whole and the role that actual greater engagement economically can play in this region and stability in the region as well.
You say that New Zealand.
Thank
You say that New Zealand and Singapore are like-minded on issues, but Singapore actually abstained from the vote in the UN to suspend Russia from that UN rights body. Are we
The
really?
Human Rights Council?
Yes. Yeah. Are we really on the same page when it comes to Russia and Ukraine?
Oh, look, you'll see actually very strong statements have been made by Singapore on Ukraine. On that issue, again, it would be a matter for the Prime Minister himself to speak to, but from some of the reporting, that for them was a process issue around how procedurally they considered such matters should be dealt with. But look, on Ukraine, Singapore has, in my mind, taken a strong position, as you've seen many other countries do.
And just lastly, so what's the vibe check on actually making it overseas?
It is fantastic to be able to pick up again what has previously been such an important part of this job, and that is promoting New Zealand's interests abroad, promoting our exporters, promoting our people. To be out and able to do that again is fantastic. But you are reminded that the whole world is in a transition right now. Up to our third test as part of this trip, the world isn't quite back to normal, but we are in a great position as a nation to encourage people to come and visit our part of the world because we are open for business.
Are you relieved to have tested negative?
When you're speaking with the Singaporean Prime Minister, what will you be talking about in regard to China and its relationship and friendship with Russia, and how tricky does it make our friendship with China and Singapore's relationship with China too?
It's fair to say that we are living in an increasingly complex part of the world and have been for some time. But we're also seeing globally that there is pressure on our rules-based order. It has been threatened and disrupted and upended by the actions of Russia. And I think what we want to see in our region is that we continue the dialogue that is needed to ensure we don't see escalation in our part of the world, militarisation in our part of the world, that we respect one another's sovereignty and territory, and take a very strong stand where we see others in breach of those principles.
It might seem an obvious answer, but we've seen already the difficulties of Prime Ministerial travel now in COVID-19 with the positive test results coming back overnight. Is it worth it?
Yes.
Why?
We are a trading nation. We are a nation where moving our goods and services around the world is incredibly important to us. These are our fourth and fifth biggest trading partners that we're visiting as part of this mission. And we've been able to do a lot whilst we've had our borders closed but our goods still moving. But there's nothing quite like being able to meet face to face. And there are ways to do it as safely as possible. It's not without risk, but it is time now for New Zealand to be reaching out again, inviting people within this new normal to come and visit New Zealand because we are open for business.
Prime Minister, Labour had some bottom lines on the what was then the TPP opposition, particularly around pharmaceuticals, which the US's exit from the pact actually made easier for you guys to get a CPTPP over the line. Do you retain those bottom lines?
Yes.
And do you think the US can enter a partnership without, I guess, bringing some of the things around pharmaceuticals which most New Zealanders don't want?
Look, and as we've always said, anyone who wants to enter into the CPTPP, there will be an expectation from signatories that they uphold those high standards that were agreed by existing members of that agreement. New Zealand worked very hard on the issues that were sensitive to us. We got it into a place where we felt comfortable being a part of it and where we have materially benefited from it. But those areas that we will still remain firm on, we will continue to do so regardless of who we're trying to encourage to join.
So is the pact a bit of a black box? You can't open it up and you're not going to open it up and change it out.
It's not just, again,
someone's joining a pact as it stands.
Well, that's not just a matter for New Zealand, of course. That is a member for those who are already part of the CPTPP. But We have an existing agreement. The starting point is that those who aspire to join it would need to meet that bar.
Prime Minister, you've just come from a sustainability and inclusion workshop. Workshop.
Just finish with you as
Yep.
well.
And there, New Zealand's done things to like move to ban plastic bags. That's still in place in Singapore. Do you think that's something that you're going to encourage PM Lee to be doing?
I think we need to lift our heads higher for the discussion around climate change and sustainability. My exchanges with international leaders are often around an exchange of ideas, around policies that we're seeing drive change, around what we can do within international institutions to drive change. That's the level at which we often have these exchanges on climate issues. I'm particularly interested as we cast forward to the discussion in Japan around some of the partnerships we've entered into around green energy options. There you'll see some very practical ways that we can work together to address climate issues. All right, thanks everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Everyone's got what they need on the working